President Donald Trump set off a storm of speculation across diplomatic and media circles after predicting that a deal over Gaza could soon be reached following Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's speech at the United Nations General Assembly. What made his remarks even more striking was the added whisper from inner sources who claim that Trump is actively working to secure Netanyahu's agreement to end the Gaza war, while Hamas, according to those same sources, has already indicated its readiness for such an outcome. The combination of Trump's bold prediction and insider confirmations electrified the atmosphere, raising questions about whether the world might be closer than ever to a turning point in one of its most enduring conflicts. Standing before reporters shortly after Netanyahu concluded his address, Trump chose his words carefully but delivered them with characteristic confidence. He said that the region may be closer to peace than many observers realize, that deals often appear impossible until suddenly they are not, and that the speech Netanyahu had just delivered laid down the framework for potential breakthroughs. Behind the cameras, however, sources familiar with ongoing back-channel talks quietly suggested that Trump is not merely speculating but is in fact engaged in conversations with key figures who could push this process forward. These insiders insisted that his goal is to nudge Netanyahu into accepting an arrangement that would bring an end to the Gaza war, and they emphasized that Hamas has already expressed readiness to sign on to a formula that would guarantee relief for civilians and a cessation of hostilities. Netanyahu's address at the General Assembly was fiery and uncompromising on the surface. He warned about Iran's destabilizing influence, condemned rocket fire from Gaza, and vowed that Israel would never compromise its security. But woven through his defiant tone were carefully chosen phrases about stability, normalization, and the hope of broader peace across the Middle East. For some, those hints were easily overlooked. For others, especially seasoned diplomats, they signaled a subtle shift in positioning. Trump wasted no time linking his optimism to Netanyahu's words, declaring that when leaders talk about peace in moments of confrontation, it often means negotiations are closer to bearing fruit than most imagine. The idea that Hamas is already prepared to move toward an agreement adds fuel to this moment. According to officials who spoke under condition of anonymity, envoys from Hamas have quietly conveyed to mediators in Doha and Cairo that the group is open to extended ceasefires, humanitarian corridors, and eventually a larger deal if Israel shows willingness to reciprocate. They claim that Hamas leadership, battered by months of fighting and facing mounting pressure from a war-weary population in Gaza, now sees benefit in exploring pathways to reduce suffering and stabilize the territory. These messages, insiders say, have been picked up and analyzed in Washington, Tel Aviv, and elsewhere, contributing to a growing sense that the pieces for a breakthrough might be aligning. Trump's inner circle, according to these sources, has been in touch with intermediaries who are close to both the Israeli and Arab sides of the equation. Their task is not to draft a final peace agreement but to create political space in which Netanyahu could agree to stop the war without appearing weak. One advisor suggested that Trump's approach is to frame any deal as a historic victory for Israel's security and a triumph of American diplomacy, a narrative that Netanyahu might find politically palatable. The fact that Hamas has already signaled readiness means the burden of movement now falls more squarely on Netanyahu, making Trump's pressure campaign all the more significant. Inside the halls of the UN, diplomats buzzed with speculation as Trump's comments circulated. Some scoffed at the idea that Netanyahu would ever agree to end the war under pressure, while others argued that Trump's track record with the Abraham Accords showed that what seems impossible one day can suddenly materialize the next. European representatives were cautious, pointing out that the humanitarian crisis in Gaza remains catastrophic, with shortages of food, medicine, and electricity deepening by the day. They doubted that any quick fix could solve such entrenched problems, but they acknowledged that even rumors of insider momentum could change calculations on the ground. The Biden administration, caught off guard by Trump's statements, responded carefully. Officials praised any effort that might bring relief to civilians while reiterating America's commitment to Israel's security. They neither confirmed nor denied the insider claims that Trump was pushing Netanyahu, but they did say the United States continues to support Egyptian and Qatari mediation. White House aides admitted privately that Trump's comments could complicate ongoing negotiations by raising expectations, yet they also conceded that the former president still commands attention in international arenas. For Netanyahu, the balancing act is delicate. His public posture remains firm, emphasizing Israel's right to self-defense and his refusal to make concessions to Hamas. But those close to him know that prolonged conflict carries its own political risks. Israeli citizens living near the Gaza border are exhausted by the cycle of alarms and shelters, while the broader public increasingly questions how long the fighting can continue without a sustainable solution. Sources suggest that Netanyahu has listened carefully to Trump's arguments and recognizes that framing an end to the Gaza war as part of a larger security guarantee might provide a way out of the stalemate. From Hamas's side, the readiness to move toward a deal is less about ideology and more about survival. Gaza's economy is shattered, its people are suffering, and its leadership faces pressure from within. By signaling flexibility, Hamas hopes to secure humanitarian relief and preserve its role in governing the territory. Insiders caution that Hamas is not about to recognize Israel or abandon its long-term demands, but that it is willing to pause the fighting and explore interim solutions if it means aid will flow and destruction will stop. Trump's prediction, combined with insider claims that both sides are closer than ever, gives this moment an air of possibility that has been rare in the conflict. Observers note that optimism itself can act as a force multiplier in diplomacy. When leaders believe a deal might be possible, they often take risks that would otherwise seem unthinkable. And when populations sense that an end to suffering could be near, they put pressure on their leaders to seize the moment. In Israel, this pressure is mounting in the form of protests and public debate about the cost of continued fighting. In Gaza, it takes the form of desperation as families wait for food deliveries and hospitals struggle to operate with dwindling supplies. International actors are paying close attention to these signals. Egypt has invested months of quiet shuttle diplomacy between Hamas and Israel, hoping to prevent escalation into a wider war. Qatar has provided funds for humanitarian relief and acted as a bridge to Hamas leadership in exile. The United Nations has repeatedly called for ceasefires and warned of the consequences if the conflict drags on. Against this backdrop, Trump's sudden prediction and the leaks from inner sources suggesting that Netanyahu could be pressed into agreement created a sense that events may be accelerating. Analysts point out that Netanyahu is under significant political strain at home, where divisions within his coalition and ongoing corruption trials make every decision fraught with risk. Agreeing to end the Gaza war could expose him to criticism from hardliners, yet it could also present him as a statesman capable of delivering security and relief. For Hamas, the calculation is equally complex. Ending the war under Trump's framework could provide breathing space, but it risks alienating factions that prefer continued resistance. Still, sources say Hamas is more united than usual on the need for relief and may accept terms it would previously have rejected. Global reactions have been swift. European leaders urged cautious optimism, emphasizing that real progress requires concrete actions, not just words. Arab states largely welcomed the idea of progress, though some warned against sidelining the broader Palestinian question. Iran rejected the idea outright, accusing Trump of trying to rehabilitate Netanyahu's image while ignoring deeper injustices. But for families on the ground, rhetoric matters little compared to daily survival. In Israeli border towns, parents still hurry their children to shelters when sirens wail. In Gaza, families line up for scarce bread and water, praying the bombing will stop. To them, any whisper of a deal offers a fragile but precious hope. Trump himself appears keenly aware of this symbolism. By positioning himself once again as a dealmaker, he underscores his political identity ahead of the U.S. election campaign. Supporters tout his ability to deliver historic agreements as proof of his leadership. Critics accuse him of exploiting tragedy for political gain. But whether admired or doubted, Trump has succeeded in focusing global attention on Gaza at a critical juncture. As the days pass, observers will look for tangible signs. Will there be a longer ceasefire brokered by Egypt and Qatar? Will aid trucks be allowed to move more freely into Gaza? Will prisoners be exchanged as a gesture of goodwill? Or will the momentum fizzle out, leaving behind only frustration and hardened positions? For now, the air is thick with speculation. Trump's prediction and the inner sources claiming that Netanyahu can be persuaded and Hamas is ready have created a new narrative. It is a narrative of possibility in a region too often defined by stalemate. And while no one can say with certainty what tomorrow will bring, the mere fact that such discussions are happening at the highest levels suggests that change may indeed be closer than it appears. Whether that change results in a lasting peace or another fleeting truce will depend on the choices made in the days and weeks ahead. For now, the world waits, watches, and wonders if the words spoken in New York and the whispers shared in back channels could soon reshape the future of Gaza and the lives of millions who call it home.